We welcome spirits to the light. We welcome spirits wrong or right. We dig down deep inside the earth and drag up something to judge its worth. We chat and shout and screech and scream, but we do not appear as we first may seem.
In a sentence, the Hamartia project is about inspiring young performers to take the raw material of Greek tragedy and make a performance that's their own. In the summer of 2016, my colleague Ralph Anderson and myself realised that there was a local youth theatre group called Bar Youth Theatre Limited. Quite quickly it emerged that the best group to work with on a project related to Greek drama and probably Greek tragedy in particular was a group called the Adult Youth Collaborative Theatre Group. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yeah.
Initially, we weren't really sure what we would do, but I came in and told the group, sort of lectured to the group a little bit about what Greek drama is, the kind of festival context of Greek tragedy, to kind of create a kind of more structured project with the group, a kind of creative project where they would devise their own performance through a series of workshops and rehearsals, having input both from myself and my colleague Ralph, and but with Stephen really heavily involved, and get the group to kind of build their own performance that would in some sense be inspired by Greek drama and Greek tragedy and the sort of teaching and work that I did with them. Thinking about the choruses, it's a very powerful opening chorus. Where did that come from? The Chorus of Furies. How did you end up with that Chorus of Furies and the verse chants that come from it?
We knew that we wanted to do a chorus piece, and we wanted it to be kind of poetic, because that's what we've all seen when we've read Greek tragedy. Is we've seen that there's always this chorus, and they often speak in verse.
I think it just helped the fact that there was, like, throughout Greek text, there's always three Furies. There's always, like, certain to be three of them, so it helped that there was three of us in the chorus and bringing to light what we wanted to achieve. Each Fury represents one bad decision he made in his life to do with his campaign, his career choices, and it's all to do with the kind of judgment we're placing on him, kind of like, these are the consequences, this is what's happened, this is where you brought us.
So Gillian obviously represents the kind of the personal slash, well, kind of private even almost, isn't it?
That's right.
There's the private. You obviously are representing the nation.
Yeah, like the public.
The public side of things. And Mirta, what did we say Mirta represented again? What P was she? So we have personal, public. Professional, that was it.
I play one of the Furies, but then I also play his colleague. So he works with his colleague, and then he basically denies his colleague of this position they've promised each other for years, and that doesn't go down very well.
Wanted to see me.
Yes, come in.
Well, in Greek tragedy, ghosts, they have a storytelling role quite often. So in Euripides' Hecuba, you have the ghost of Polydorus kind of explains, what's happened to him, why he's been killed, why he's come back, as it were, in the play. But they also quite often explain things to the onstage characters, or they can, in a sense, represent something terrible that's happened in the past. They can be, as it were, a presence which really becomes a focal point for a moment of reckoning within the plot of the tragedies themselves.
But the expedition has failed.
The ghost is a good device in your devised play, bringing the present and the past together. And it's been really noticeable from the young people in the group how interested they are in the idea, if you like, of intergenerational justice. They're interested in the idea of someone who may be now dead, nevertheless being called to account for things they did when they were alive.
Your expeditions that you pushed for were unsuccessful, and most people did not return.
Under your leadership, the party crumbled.
You were talking earlier about how I'd done a session with you all about ghosts in Greek tragedy, and I talked a little bit about different plays. It sounds as if you went back with them and actually did more work with them was it Aeschylus' Persians, is that right?
Yeah, so what I did is I gave them a section of the choral piece where the Persians have come together and they're summoning up the spirit of Darius. And on top of that as well, I gave them the section where the witches are calling up
Hecate
from Macbeth.
Oh, right, yeah.
Used those two segments to kind of act as a springboard to get them to think about their own choral piece and how they can use this, this image of summoning a spirit, but also bringing something up from under the earth. How they could incorporate that into their own choral piece. So it was a great springboard. And again, like the characters they're playing, the Furies, I mean, they're part Fury, they're almost part witch. There's almost an element of like a backhand. Yeah, there's very they're very multifaceted, but using those two texts in particular really got them thinking about how they could look at this idea of the underworld, how they could bring, look at this idea of digging into the earth and bringing something up, and it's come out well. So,
and of course, also I think the group's interested in ghosts because, in both popular culture and novels and films, the sort of supernatural element, I think, is very appealing to modern audiences. The idea of necromancy, for example. Dramatically, it's very spectacular, but it also has that feeling of the uncanny, the magical, the supernatural, something awe-inspiring and scary. So it's dramatically interesting, and it's thematically interesting as well for modern audiences, because of this enduring fascination with the idea of the supernatural.
what do you think has been a bit of not a struggle, but what has been one of the more kind of difficult parts of the process so far? Writing the opening.
It was so long to write 6 lines.
It did. No. I feel it kind of came on leaps and bounds, to be honest. It's only been a couple of weeks since they've actually created that tiny piece of choral text, and already it's got shape. They've really started to kind of get into the characters more. So the kind of subtle differences between characters are really starting to come through. And it's quite atmospheric already. Within the space of an hour, they've created something that's really quite atmospheric, and it's interesting. I'm really proud of them.
There was a real sense that they were summoning up something from under the ground, and that it had that feel of influence of ancient theatre about it, whilst not just being some kind of sort of second-hand copy. It felt very natural.
It sounds like a really weird analogy to use, but have you seen any footage of feral children before?
Yes.
So children who, for whatever awful circumstances, have been brought up in the wild and they haven't had human contact. So they're like this kind of strange mix of being obviously people, but then there's that slight animalistic element to them. So it's almost like, so Gillian, if you were here, and Alice is like, yeah. So it's almost like you're kind of sheltering her, and then because then that way, because Myrta's very up high anyway, so it probably makes sense that she'll be up here, and I imagine she'll probably be in like this because she's so internalized. So then you're kind of like that, and Myrta's like that. That's quite an interesting thing to play with.
Stephen was able to do, and we brought in a choreographer for one session,
Yes.
was able to use techniques that he knows about, such as flocking, where you encourage people to move as a group, not necessarily dancing, but moving as a group,
Yes.
taking cues off each other, and also, as you said, thinking about the group as individual facets of a chorus, as well as working together. So there was individuality mixed with kind of collectivity in that group.
I think some people found it more natural than others. I think some people kind of got it a little bit more. But one thing that he stressed, and I tried to stress to them as well, is that in terms of movement, everybody's got their own way of working. So you can encompass everybody within a piece, no matter kind of how they kind of connect with their movement. It's just about trying to get them to think how they can come together, because obviously we looked at choral work, so trying to get them to think about how they listen to each other, and by listen I mean like how they connect bodily, so how they work as a group. There's techniques like flocking, there's lots of different techniques you can use to kind of encourage that. But already some of the techniques which he's used, you can see it filtering into the piece in lots of different ways. For example, like in the choral piece that we just watched, their timing, their awareness of each other is fantastic. So it's in this very short space of time, they've created something quite good. I'm happy with it.
Dig deep! We welcome spirits to the light. We welcome spirits wrong or right. We dig down deep inside the earth and drag up something to judge its worth. We chant and shout and screech and scream. We do not appear as we first may seem.
So Stephen just asked me what I thought of that, and I was really impressed with it because it felt very organic and natural, and it felt like it had a connection to ancient Greek tragic choral work, so well done with that. But one thing that also struck me, I could see how much concentration you were putting into it. What I wanted to ask was whether doing choral work like that feels different to other acting work you've done as part of the group.
For me, I've not done a lot of it, and it feels really different because, partly I think you need to stay focused in a different way. Like when you're just speaking on your own or doing something on your own, you could change the rhythm of how you say something, or you could pause to think about something. Whereas if it's a choral piece, you have to stay totally focused to make sure we're keeping up with each other and everything. You can't just think about what you're doing. It doesn't work.
Right.
You've got to feel the connection.
And I have to feel like if you're getting louder, I need to get louder, and it kind of builds as a group. It feels like it's building as a group as opposed to you're building and I'm building.
Okay. Does it feel different when you're chanting to singing? Is that?
Oh yeah. Very different, because when you're singing, you've got everyone knows the rhythm, everyone knows the timing, all that kind of thing. Whereas the chant, and someone's not exactly leading it, but when there's a hint of a lead, you've got to make sure that you're staying focused.
I was following off your rhythm as opposed to I think you following off mine.
So with this, it's useful to have a sense of who's leading at any one time. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting, because ancient Greek choruses, there was a chorus leader.
Yeah.
And one wonders whether they had that role.
It would have been for practical reasons as well, just because if there's one person's rhythm and style and volume to follow, then everyone finds it easier, I think.
Countless lost.
Party in ruins.
Children dead.
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 Countless lost. Party in ruins. Children dead. Countless lost. Party in ruins. Children dead. Countless lost. Party in ruins. Children dead.
When the politician is incorporated with the Fury characters, there are various sort of rituals of taking off his tie and jewellery and so on, and sort of rebirthing him even though he's dead and all the rest of it. What does that bring to drama, the ritual aspects?
I think the rituals are quite good for in plays and that, for actually emphasising that there is something happening. So if you basically just said threw a bucket on somebody's head, or something, this person is now transformed into something else, you're not really going to be oh, then you wouldn't really necessarily think that was the case. But if it, like the rituals actually show time and care that have actually been put into something, and actually seems to be a bit more elaborate than just doing a really just simple act and saying something has happened. So at least through like the rituals, you can actually at least visually see that there is some form of change that is happening instead of it just being told about it.
Yeah, like the change of tone and pace, because most of it's quite like quick, funny dialogue or angry dialogue, except the rituals, which are very slow. And I think they're interesting, and they give us a chance to like breathe. And also, I think that the like change in pace, like you said, makes the audience notice something's happening. They're like, oh, this isn't what I'm used to seeing in the theatre. This is something different, so I should pay attention. Because especially because we don't have the masks, we need a way for the audience to be like, oh, that person's not who they were a minute ago. And I think it's good for that.
Okay, so I asked you guys to think about the ritualistic element and how we can potentially incorporate that within the piece. What have you potentially come up with? What are your thoughts so far on that?
Well, we worked out that at the end, the idea is that Cameron's character is going to become a fury, as it were.
Okay.
And so we ended up talking to Ralph quite a bit, because Ralph knows a lot about Greek religion. That's what he teaches and researches. And it struck me that it was like, in a sense, one ritual analogue from the ancient Greek world would be initiation.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Now initiation rites tend to be secret rites, don't they, Ralph? But there are certain, we know though, and also from comparative anthropology, we know that ancient Greek initiation has these stages. What are the stages?
Yeah, talking about the stages. So this is really something that's been brought in from the comparative anthropology, but a lot of rites of passage or initiations have kind of 3 stages, basically a kind of beginning, middle and an end. So your opening phase is a rite of separation, where quite often the person who's being initiated is conceived of as kind of symbolically dying.
Which works in the beginning of the piece. So.
You have a sort of marginal phase in the middle where you're kind of quite often doing a sort of ritual opposite of what you were or what you will be. So a man undergoing initiation might be sort of female for a while, a woman might sort of take on a male role for a bit. And then in the third phase, you've got a rite of reintegration, where basically you come back into the community, so you're kind of symbolically reborn. And once you come back in, you've got your new status.
Bringing up of the spirit at the beginning, so that is the symbolic death. You've got the liminal phase in between, which is the bardo state, which is what we talked about already. And then the reintegration element through the ritual act. I think that totally works. That's really interesting.
You've got to think about what Cameron's doing while this is happening. I mean, they could be circling him.
Are you building him up in some way? Are you removing something? Are you adding something?
I thought, like, to bring him into being Fury, we had like some significant objects or piece of clothing from like the politician, so say like a tie or like a badge or something for his party.
Okay.
We put them into some kind of sacrificial.
Like an altar or something.
That's what I was looking for.
Okay, yeah.
Put it into something, and because of the irony with water and the lack of water, pouring some water on top, some kind of enchanted water, and then that's like rebirthing that into a mask to be a fury.
Okay.
So then we get the death and rebirth as in the initiation.
Okay, totally.
But also, these rituals have processions. So we also thought that there should be circular movement. You have circular dancing a lot in the choral elements of ritual, and you also have processions. So a sort of circular procession while they're chanting, and incorporate that somehow with this business of death and rebirth.
Because obviously water is the kind of the main image that we're using throughout this. What I mean by ripple effect is almost like each one of you activates the other, so almost kind of creates that sort of, first instance, the second instance, the bigger instance, and so it's that kind of
it's
flow.
nice having them like kind of joined together as opposed to being like one thing.
Yeah.
Which just feels really blocky and a bit weird.
Yeah, and it's into like the way that Mirta brings out the memory for Julian is actually quite violent. There's
lots of slamming.
But it's good because the slamming it's almost a bit like crashing waves as well. Water! Have you thought about how the masks could be brought into that?
Well, no, but the mask is getting put on camera, but they've already got to be wearing a mask in that case, haven't they? So we need some kind of a ritual of putting on the masks.
Okay, so yeah, and perhaps that's what sparks the ritual off then.
Yeah.
So we've concluded so like the liminal phase. Perhaps then you don the masks, you then do something which then, symbolically then integrates Cameron within the group, and then that could be the final assimilation or something.
I thought a nice idea to have the masks throughout the piece.
Okay.
We did a welcome to Barnet last week.
Mm-hmm.
You know how I've seen kind of like secretaries, secretaries have like little name things.
Mm-hmm.
Things keep their masks.
Okay, so what do you mean?
It's kind of like there as a purpose, but we don't know what the purpose is.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of like hinting at it further on.
So but having the masks off, so they're present all the
so
time.
they're like in front of you, like we're up.
Yes.
I mean, movie.
So they're like a designating marker, almost, and then, that's cool.
I think a good thing about the masks was it kind of showed a different personality. One idea was that it helped differentiate between the Fury and the character of like the colleague, the wife, or the opponent, or whatever. It helped distinguish the difference, and it also like helped show like sides of her personality, because we've all got different types of anger. Like Mauritius is internalised, mine was emotional, and Alice's was like a violent angry, and like it was kind of helping to show what like made our different types of angers. Like mine was going to be like kind of rapid, just going to be quite still. I was going to be like mental.
However, practically, once we started developing the choral pieces, and the energy that the girls were able to kind of use and give off just through facial expressions and voice alone, obviously it became clear that masks were not going to work. It just wasn't going to fit with what they were trying to do.
I think it was interesting when we used the masks in rehearsal, because I think if we're thinking about like Greek theatre, it showed us how much more physical they'd have to be than we're used to in modern theatre. Because even when we put on like these little white practice masks, we all immediately became much more physical with our acting, because you can't rely on your facial expression as much.
Good. So you became more aware of your movements and the importance of those.
And I thought that was really cool, because I think when people think about old-fashioned acting, even back to like Greek, they think of a lot of the sort of gestures and things as being really over-exaggerated. But I think it makes sense. Once you've tried it with the masks, it makes sense, because you need them to be to get what you're trying to put across to the audience.
I think, despite the masks not being used, I think the work that we did with them in the workshop, and also the design elements and all that kind of thing, I think it gave them a focal point of character to latch onto, which they could then actually just channel through their voice and their body language, really.
Tear,
Rend, dran,
fear, tear,
rend, dran,
fear.
Spirit once exposed to light, your wrongs dug deep are now in sight.
No silvered tongue or grave lament.
One of the big things that was really important for the group was to learn, obviously, a bit of history about where the Western theatrical tradition kind of comes from. And so obviously looking back into Greek roots was an important way of saying, well, this is the past, this is your history, and then kind of have it filter them back through and how that affects their kind of practice now. So I think they found it really beneficial, kind of learning about that kind of stuff.
My initial thought, even when we decided we were going to get the students to devise their own performance, my initial thought was it would be very much based on a particular Greek drama, whereas what we actually ended up with was something that was inspired by Greek drama, but every word of that performance and every sort of choreographed movement, every character came from the students' own ideas, and it had a very contemporary feel. So in some ways it looks very different from a Greek tragedy. In other ways you can see how it's very much been kind of created out of the sort of building blocks of a Greek drama.
You to us are sadly bound. We send you forth to hunt and hound those you prized and hold so dear,
To tear and rend.
I'm drowned in fear.